I wasn't supposed to be there. That thought stayed with me from the moment my phone rang that evening, crackling with the voice of a supervisor I'd only ever spoken to twice. "Emergency cover," he said, clipped, impatient. Someone had called in sick. Could I take the last night shift at the yard? He didn't even wait for my answer before sending the details. The whole thing felt rushed, like I was the last card in a bad hand. The yard itself wasn't new to me. I'd filled in there once or twice, long enough to know the layout, short enough to still get lost if I wandered past the main loading bay. But when I stepped through the gate that night, the place felt wrong. The air was thick, the kind of summer heat that presses down on you. But it was more than that. The silence was wrong. Even off hours, the place should hum. A few trucks idling in the dark, stray voices carrying across the concrete. Instead, nothing. I scanned the roster sheet clipped to the security booth window. That's when I noticed it. My name was there, penciled in faintly, almost an afterthought. No other names for my section. No second shift worker, no relief. Just me. Inside, the main hallway stretched ahead, lit by tired fluorescent tubes that hummed in a syncopated rhythm. I passed the office door, shut tight, and headed to the time clock. The machine stuttered as I punched in, another beat too slow, like it was resisting the time I was giving it. I slid my card back into the slot and saw the other cards in the rack. All empty spaces except mine. The first hour was uneventful. I did the rounds, checked the loading bay doors, secured the equipment cage, made notes about nothing. Yet the whole time, I had the sense of being accompanied. You know that feeling when someone stands behind you, just close enough that your body reacts before your mind catches up. Every time I turned, there was nothing but air and shadow. The intercom crackled just before midnight. Static, low and restless, like a crowd murmuring far away. I picked up the receiver, said my name. Silence. Then, faintly, so faint I wasn't sure I'd heard it, came the sound of footsteps. Not on metal or tile. On something softer, closer, like they were in the hall outside. I dropped the receiver back onto its hook and walked to the door. The corridor was empty, but the far light was flickering. A regular flicker, almost like Morse code. I didn't know the pattern, but my chest tightened as I watched it. The break room offered nothing but bad coffee and a view of the back lot. I leaned against the counter and saw a figure standing at the edge of the lamplight. Too far to make out details, but close enough to see the shape of their shoulders. They didn't move, just stood there, as if they knew I could see them. I blinked, and they were gone. The clock in the lobby read 12:32 a.m. I don't know why that exact time dug into me, but my eyes kept finding it every few minutes. The second hand stuttered sometimes, holding still for just half a breath too long. Halfway through the shift, I heard the sound again. Footsteps, but not on the floor this time. Overhead. I climbed the service stairs to the mezzanine, where the old offices were. My flashlight beam caught dust motes swirling like snow. Every door was locked but one, a narrow, unmarked one. I didn't remember from the site map. It opened into darkness so heavy it seemed to swallow the light. The room smelled faintly of oil and something sweeter, something rotting. In the center stood a wooden chair, its seat worn to a pale oval from years of use. Beside it, on the floor, lay a lunchbox, my lunchbox. The same brand, the same dent in the corner, only it wasn't mine. Inside were a sandwich, an apple, and a note in my handwriting. Don't clock out. I shut the lunchbox and backed out, pulling the door closed behind me. My pulse thundered in my ears, but the building seemed to listen too. Quiet, waiting. Back downstairs, I found the intercom light blinking. I pressed the button, but before I could speak, a voice whispered through. My voice. Same pitch, same rasp. You shouldn't be here. The line went dead. The rest of the shift dragged like a bad dream. I kept to the main floor, avoiding the mezzanine, avoiding that room. Every sound felt magnified, every shadow too deep. At 3:17 a.m., all the lights went out at once. Emergency lights flickered on, painting the walls in red. In that blood-hued dimness, the far end of the hall seemed farther away than it had before, stretching into dark that didn't belong. I didn't remember walking toward it, but I found myself halfway there, my steps too loud, echoing in a way that suggested someone else's footsteps just behind mine. I stopped and they stopped. I turned, and there, no more than 10 feet away, I saw myself, standing perfectly still, head tilted, eyes unreadable in the emergency glow. And then the other me, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. The red lights cut out for a second, total darkness swallowing us. When they came back, I was alone again. By the time dawn bled into the yard, I was numb. The clock ticked towards 6 a.m. I punched out, sliding my card back into the rack. Only, it wasn't there anymore. In its place was an empty slot, as though it had never been. I left without checking the roster again. Some part of me knew I wouldn't like what I found. The morning after my so-called shift, I tried to tell myself it had just been exhaustion, nerves, tricks of bad lighting. That worked until I opened my locker at home. I kept my work things in there. Spare gloves, a half-empty coffee tin, a notebook. But sitting on top of everything was the lunchbox, the same one I'd found in that mezzanine room. My handwriting on the note inside was unchanged, as though the ink had dried seconds ago. I didn't touch it. I left the whole thing on the shelf, shut the locker, and told myself I'd throw it out later. I still haven't. By evening, my phone rang again. This time, the supervisor's voice was calm, like last night's frantic scheduling never happened. Thanks for covering, he said. We've got you on the roster again, same slot, if you're available. I asked why. He paused, just long enough that I could hear the hum of the line, and then said, You did fine. No mention of who'd called in sick or why there was no relief worker. Every instinct told me to refuse, but something heavier pressed me toward yes. Curiosity, obligation, the need to see if what happened could happen again. When I returned, the yard seemed more alive than it had the night before, but not in the way that brings comfort. The air was busier. Shadows moved differently, like they were aware of me. The hum from the fluorescents had deepened into something almost musical. Not a tune I could place, just a slow, three-note pattern that cycled endlessly. I started my rounds, deliberately pacing them slower. In the loading bay, a pallet jack sat parked in the exact center of the floor. I had left it against the wall the previous night. Its wheels faced me, like it had been waiting. Half an hour later, I heard the first noise. Not footsteps this time. Tapping. 3 short taps, a pause, 3 more. Metal against metal. It seemed to come from the equipment cage. I unlocked it, shined my flashlight inside. Everything was in place except for one toolbox, which had been pulled halfway off the shelf so its corner pointed toward the floor. The tapping stopped as soon as my light hit it. At the security office, I tried the CCTV feed. The mezzanine camera flickered in and out. On one of the clear frames, I saw the unmarked door open, only for a moment, then closed again. But I didn't remember unlocking it the night before. Around 1 a.m., I went to the break room for coffee. The vending machine, dead for months, was lit up. Inside, every slot held the same item, a packet of salted crackers. 10 identical packets, lined up like soldiers. My reflection in the glass looked paler than it should, and just as I leaned closer, the lights in the machine went out. I sat at the table, staring at the crackers, until the intercom clicked on. This time, there was no static, just breathing, slow, deliberate. I picked up the receiver, said nothing. The breathing stopped. Then a soft voice, mine again but hoarser, said, "Check the roster." I went straight to the front desk. The roster sheet was there, but the columns had changed. Instead of dates and names, each row listed a time of death. The first was from years ago, the last from tomorrow. My name was beside it. My hands shook as I put the sheet back. I told myself I'd misread it, that I needed sleep. But I didn't leave. Later, near 3 a.m., I heard the tapping again, this time from above. I climbed the mezzanine stairs, every step creaking like an old warning. The unmarked door was open an inch. No lights spilled out. I pushed it wider. The chair was gone. In its place was a long strip of cloth, frayed and stained, stretched across the floor. At one end lay a watch, my watch. But the hands were missing, the glass face cracked from the inside. Something shifted in the corner, a sound like someone exhaling after holding their breath too long. The air turned cold enough that my skin prickled. I aimed my light toward the sound. Nothing there. But the cold stayed. I backed out, shutting the door, locking it this time. The key felt slick in my hand, though my palm was dry. The rest of the shift was uneventful, if you could call ignoring the feeling of being watched uneventful. The hum from the lights never stopped. That 3-note pattern followed me down every corridor. When dawn came, I didn't punch out. I left my card in the rack, just to see if it would stay there. I haven't checked yet. By the third night, I had convinced myself I needed answers. The roster sat on the front desk again when I came in. My name still there, faint and almost smudged, like it didn't want to be noticed. No other names, no explanation. I clocked in without looking at the rest of the sheet, as though ignoring it might keep its strange details from getting worse. The corridors were cooler tonight, the air less heavy. It should have been a relief, but instead the cold clung to me like damp cloth. I moved slower, listening. The building had a way of making its emptiness feel occupied. You could stand still and swear the air shifted around you, just enough for your skin to register. On the mezzanine, the unmarked door was closed again. The key in my pocket felt heavier than it had the night before, almost bending against the fabric. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I ran the rest of my rounds, forcing myself through the lit hallways and ignoring the spots where the lights didn't reach. Halfway through the shift, the tapping began. This time, it was rhythmic. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. I knew enough Morse code to recognize SOS. It came from above. I climbed the stairs. The mezzanine was darker than it should have been. The overhead fixtures were off entirely. Only the glow from the stairwell behind me touched the metal rails and dust-coated floor. My footsteps echoed too loudly. At the door, I hesitated, the key cold in my grip. Then I turned it. The lock clicked, but the door swung inward before I touched it. The room beyond was exactly as I remembered from the first night. Chair in the center, dust motes drifting. Except for one thing. The chair was facing the door now. I stepped inside. The air was different here. Still, stale, and yet humming faintly, like I'd stepped inside the lungs of some vast, sleeping thing. My flashlight skimmed the walls, bare concrete, no windows, no fixtures, and landed on the chair. On its seat was a small recorder, the kind you could buy for cheap in an electronics shop. I pressed play. Static filled the room, then my own voice, urgent, breathless. Don't let it close. The door slammed behind me. I dropped the recorder, lunged for the handle. It turned easily, too easily. But when I stepped out, I wasn't in the mezzanine. The corridor ahead was longer than any in the yard, stretching into a distance that bent subtly to the left. The walls were smooth, no seams, no doors. The only sound was that three-note hum, deeper now, vibrating in my bones. I took a step. The floor under me wasn't concrete anymore, but something softer, muffled. Footfalls echoed like I was walking on thick wood. Every dozen steps or so, I thought I saw movement at the far curve, just enough to draw me forward. The curve ended at another door. It was identical to the mezzanine one, unmarked, metal, the same dent near the hinge. I opened it and stepped through. The yard's break room greeted me. Lights humming, vending machine dead again. My coffee mug sat on the table, full and steaming as though I'd just poured it. But the wall clock read 12:32 a.m., same as the first night when I'd seen the figure in the lot. Something in me snapped. I turned, left the room, marched straight for the mezzanine stairs. This time, when I opened the door, the chair was gone. The recorder was gone. In their place was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. I unfolded it. It was the roster, but not in pencil, and not for any date I knew. Names I didn't recognize filled the left column, the right one listing times. Every time had a cross beside it. All but the last. That line held only my name, and the word pending. I don't remember leaving the mezzanine. One moment I was staring at my name, the next I was at the main desk, the paper still in my hand. The desk phone rang. Shrill in the stillness, against my better judgment, I answered. "Did you lock it?" The voice was mine again. Not whispering this time. Level, calm, almost conversational. I hung up. The phone rang immediately. I didn't answer. The rest of the night blurred. I kept moving, half afraid that if I stopped, the building would close around me like a fist. Once, in the loading bay, I passed the pallet jack, and it was turned toward me again, though I hadn't touched it since arriving. The headlights from the yard outside spilled across its handle like a spotlight. Near dawn, I tried one last time to check the unmarked door. The key wouldn't even slide in. It was as if the lock had sealed over in my pocket. My hand came away cold, fingertips numb. At 6 a.m., I punched out. My card slipped easily back into its slot, and for a moment, I felt relief. But when I looked again, there were now 2 cards side by side. Both had my name. I used to think silence was neutral, that the absence of noise meant peace. Now I know silence has a shape. It can lean towards you. It can listen. The fourth night began the same way as the others. My name, faint on the roster. No other entries. A building that seemed to recognize me as I stepped inside. The fluorescents greeted me with their low hum, but something was different. A faint hiss underneath, like a distant rain on metal. When I paused in the corridor, the hiss stopped. When I moved, it started again. I made my way to the security office first. The CCTV monitors sat in 2 rows, their usual feed showing the corridors, loading bay, break room, and mezzanine. But the top left screen, the one for the mezzanine hallway, was flickering. Not the casual flicker of bad wiring, but rapid shifts between angles, a close-up of the unmarked door, the empty railings, and sometimes darkness. When the image was dark, the audio kicked in through the tiny monitor speaker. A low thud, like footsteps moving toward the camera. I leaned closer. The sound grew clearer, layered. Someone, or something, was walking there. But I could also hear breathing, not in time with the steps. Then, faintly, a voice. Behind you. I turned. The office was empty, the doorway dark. When I looked back, the mezzanine feed showed a figure standing with her back to the camera. Shoulders narrow, head tilted to the left. Same build as mine. I switched the feed off. For the next hour, I avoided the mezzanine. I stuck to the main floor, checking doors I'd already checked twice. But the building was changing the rules. I could feel it. The air currents shifted unpredictably, as though the structure itself were breathing. At 12:11 a.m., the intercom on the wall outside the break room lit up. No static this time, just a faint crackle and the sound of shoes on metal stairs. I didn't touch the receiver, but the speaker clicked anyway, as though someone had picked up from the other end. Come up. My voice again. The tone was casual, almost warm. I stood frozen, eyes on the mezzanine stairs at the far end of the corridor. The landing above was dark, but I could make out the faint glint of the railing. No movement, no shape. Still, the invitation clung to me. I forced myself toward the break room instead. The vending machine, dead the night before, was glowing faintly green. This time, it held nothing but rows of watches. Cheap plastic, their faces all set to the same time. 12:32. I didn't touch them. Through the break room window, I saw the yard outside. A single floodlight bathed the concrete in pale yellow. And at the far edge of that light, someone stood. Same figure as the first night, still too far to read a face. But this time, the figure raised a hand and beckoned. Slow, deliberate. I backed away from the glass. At 1:04 a.m., I returned to the security office. The mezzanine feed was clearer now, as if the interference had been scrubbed away. The figure was still there, standing with their back to the camera. Closer this time. The footsteps came again, steady, confident. I watched them stop in front of the unmarked door. A pause. Then they turned their head slightly toward the camera, just enough to catch the pale curve of a cheek. My cheek. The feed cut to static. In the static, patterns formed. Formless at first, then sharper. The roster. My name alone. The date beneath was wrong. Not today, not tomorrow, but years in the past. And beside my name, in faint red lettering, the word returned. I tried to switch to another camera, but the controls weren't responding. One by one, the other feeds flickered to the same static. and in each, a faint rhythmic thumping began. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Pause. Not footsteps now, but something heavier, like a heart. My own chest answered in time without meaning to. The hum in the building deepened again. Those 3 notes bending lower, almost breaking into words I couldn't quite hear. I left the office, trying to shake the sound out of my head, but it followed, through corridors, into the loading bay, even under the echo of my own steps. Halfway across the bay, I stopped. There, at the far end, by the shutter doors, the air shimmered faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. In that distortion, I saw myself, not standing, but walking toward me, matching my pace exactly, even though I wasn't moving. I blinked and the shimmer vanished, leaving only the cold expanse of the bay. I needed to prove to myself that the mezzanine room was empty, that all of this was some frayed edge of my own mind. So I climbed. The stairs moaned under my weight, the metal colder than it should be. At the landing, the unmarked door was ajar by a sliver. Light spilled through. Not the weak yellow from before, but a harsh white that made the dust in the air stand out like falling ash. Inside, the chair was back. The recorder was back. And on the chair's seat, a small CCTV monitor. Its feed showed the loading bay, me standing at the mezzanine door, staring into the camera. Behind me, on the tiny screen, was another me, just a step closer. I turned in real life. No one was there. The monitor went to static, and through that static, my voice spoke. We've done this before. The chair scraped faintly, though I hadn't touched it. I backed out, closing the door, locking it. This time the key felt almost warm. As I descended the stairs, the hum in the building shifted higher. The same 3 notes, now faster, urgent. The lights in the hallway below began to blink in unison, each flash shortening until they were almost strobing. In one of the black frames between blinks, I thought I saw the other me at the far end, walking toward me with that slight tilt to the head. The lights steadied. The hallway was empty. I didn't finish the rest of my rounds. I stayed near the main doors until dawn, watching the clock. At exactly 6 a.m., I punched out. My card slipped into its slot between the other 2 with my name. Now there were 3. The 5th night began with rain. Not the usual Karachi drizzle that darkens concrete and disappears, but a steady, soaking curtain that turned the yard into a black mirror. Every light reflected twice, once on the pavement and once in the slick sheen of every metal surface. It made the place look deeper, stretched, like you could fall in if you stared long enough. The roster was waiting, my name alone again. But this time, something new. A faint shadow behind the letters, like the paper had been wet once and dried in the shape of writing. I thought I saw another name there for a heartbeat before it faded. I started in the security office. The mezzanine feed was clear, and my stomach sank at what I saw. I was already there. Standing at the unmarked door, hand on the knob, head tilted like I was listening. My clothes were the same as last night's shift, right down to the coffee stain on my sleeve. On the screen, the other me turned to look into the camera. We locked eyes, or whatever passes for eye contact through a lens. And then he smiled, not with warmth, with recognition. I reached for the intercom line to the mezzanine, hesitating as my finger hovered over the button. Before I could press it, the other me leaned close to the camera, filling the frame with my own face, and said, Don't fall behind. The feed cut to static. I grabbed my flashlight and took the stairs 2 at a time. The landing was empty, the unmarked door closed and locked. When I touched the handle, it was warm. My rounds after that were uneasy, each corner a potential mirror. In the loading bay, I caught my reflection in the grimy window of a parked truck. Except my reflection wasn't copying me. My real hand was on the flashlight. The reflection's hand was empty. The break room was worse. The vending machine glowed with its impossible stock. Not crackers, not watches this time, but Polaroid photos. All of them of me. Some candid, some at angles I couldn't place. Like someone had been standing just behind my shoulder. One photo showed me asleep at the break room table. I've never slept here. I didn't take any. I couldn't. At 1:40 a.m., the intercom outside the break room clicked on. No breathing, no static. Just a faint, rhythmic sound. Footsteps. Mine. In perfect sync with the steps I'd just taken to get here. Then they stopped. One beat after I stopped. The voice came again, softer now. "You're late." I ignored it and kept moving. But the feeling of being shadowed was impossible to shake. Every reflective surface, windows, polished floors, even a puddle by the freight elevator, seemed a little out of sync, the figure inside lagging just slightly behind. By 2:30, I was back at the security office. All the feeds were normal except one, the camera for the main lobby. In its frame, I walked in from the left side, crossed the floor, and sat in the chair by the front desk. I was sitting there now in real life, watching myself do it on the screen seconds after it happened. I tried to change the feed. The controls didn't respond. Instead, the version of me on the monitor stood, walked toward the camera, and vanished from frame. A moment later, I felt a breath at my neck. I spun. Empty room. Something told me to check the roster again. The sheet was exactly as before, my name alone. But now the second name beneath was written in faint pencil. Redacted. The letters blurred as I stared, and when I blinked, the line was gone. When I looked back at the monitor, the other me was standing in the break room, staring at the vending machine. He turned slowly, as though he knew I was watching, and gestured for me to join him. I went. The break room was empty. The vending machine was dark again, but a single Polaroid lay on the table. This one wasn't of me. It was of the other me, leaning over my shoulder, face half hidden in shadow, but smiling. I left it there. The rest of the shift, I saw him at the edge of my vision. In doorways, down halls, across the yard. Never closer than 20 feet, never farther than 30, always watching. And when the clock hit 6, I punched out, slid my card in between the others with my name. Now there were 4. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its weight. The yard smelled like rust and something faintly electric, the way the air does before a power surge. My card slid through the roster clock slot with a slow, reluctant beep. The paper roster sat under its plastic cover. My name was there at the top, as usual, but the faint pencil from last night was now ink, black and confident, redacted. Same font, same spacing, as if the system had printed it. Except the roster isn't digital. I ran a fingertip over the new name. The ink bled under my skin, cold instead of wet, and for a fraction of a second I thought it might come away on my finger. It didn't. It sank deeper, like the paper had swallowed it. In the security office, the monitors hummed a little louder than usual. The mezzanine feed was empty. The break room, empty. The vending machine, off. But on the far right monitor, the one for the archive hallway, the camera swayed slightly as if someone had brushed past it. Then he stepped into view. Not on the far end of the hallway, on my side of the lens. He looked at me through the camera, a half smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. Then he reached toward something I couldn't see and pulled a paper from under his arm. He held it up to the lens, the roster, my name, his name. 2 empty lines below. Then he walked backward, deeper into the archives, and the feed died. I don't remember standing. I do remember walking, the flashlight beam jittering across old paint and sealed doors. The air in the archive hall was different, warmer, heavier. The sound of the building's hum faded until there was nothing but the soft rhythm of another set of footsteps, keeping perfect pace with mine. At the far end was a door I'd never noticed. No handle, just a seam in the wall and a narrow slot at head height. Paper had been shoved into it, stacked thick as a fist. I pulled the top sheet free. It was tonight's roster, my name and his. And under them, in faint outline, a third name slowly writing itself, letter by letter. My chest went cold when I realized it was my handwriting. Something moved behind the seam, a shadow shifting as though it had been standing inches from me the whole time. A voice, my voice, whispered from the other side. You clocked in. You can't clock out. I backed away. The paper in my hand twitched, as though it wanted to fold itself. I dropped it, and the sheet slid back toward the slot, vanishing into the seam like the door was breathing in. The lights flickered. When they steadied, the hallway was shorter than before. I could see the security office from where I stood. Only inside, it sat the other me, at the console, watching me on the monitors. He reached out, touched the screen, and it was like the glass rippled. His hand came through an inch before withdrawing again. I found myself running. Past the break room, where the vending machine now displayed a looping image of me sitting at my kitchen table at home. Past the loading bay, where the truck's windows showed me still standing in the archive hall, too slow to move. At the roster clock, the paper had changed again. 4 names now, mine, his, and 2 others I didn't recognize. The bottom line blinked, like a cursor waiting for the next name to be typed. Behind me, the door clicked shut. I didn't turn around, Dot. The roster shouldn't have updated while I stood there. And yet, the ink bled in real time. Slow, deliberate strokes forming the next name on the list. Not mine, not his, someone else. The letters curled in a hand I didn't recognize, but still felt I'd seen before, as if in the background of a dream. A metallic creak sounded from the break room. Not the vending machine, the door. I moved toward it, each step loud against the hush, the roster's plastic cover still swinging slightly in the corner of my vision. The room's fluorescence buzzed, dimmer than usual. The vending machine wasn't stocked with snacks, Polaroids, or anything tangible this time. Just a shifting static that almost took the shape of a hallway. Not this hallway, older, dustier. Every few seconds, a figure flickered into frame, always turning away before I could see its face. From the corner, a shadow detached itself. It was him. No, it was me, but softened around the edges, blurred like a photo left in the sun. He stood beside the vending machine and tapped the glass. The static stabilized, showing the archive hallway from last night. In the frame, I saw myself pulling the paper roster from the seam door slot. But behind me, filling the far end of the hall, was another figure. This one I did know. The man from my first shift here. The one who trained me and vanished after 3 nights. The static cut. My double stepped closer. "That's the 4th," he said. His voice was low, almost bored, but the words sat heavy in my gut. "He's due in tonight." I asked, "Who decides the order?" He smiled, teeth too sharp in the flicker light. "The roster isn't a record, it's a script." A sound like paper tearing came from the hall. We both turned. The break room door was ajar, even though I hadn't opened it. And from the hallway outside, a strip of white curled along the floor, sliding toward me. The paper twisted mid-crawl, flattening to reveal the roster again. Now with my name sliding downward, 1 line, his taking the top. The 4th name sat beneath. Complete. I picked it up. The instant my fingers touched it, something in the building shifted. Not a noise, but a sense, like the gravity in the room had tilted. Somewhere deep in the mezzanine, a door clicked open. He stepped back into the corner shadow. "If you're still here at his end of shift, you'll take his place, and he'll take yours." The corridor to the mezzanine stretched longer than I remembered. The hum of the lights beat like a pulse, the walls just slightly breathing in and out. As I walked, I passed windows showing scenes that shouldn't exist. The yard in full daylight, the break room with someone sleeping at the table, my own apartment, empty except for my coat draped over the chair. At the mezzanine's far end, the unmarked door stood open. Inside was no room, just the archive hallway, older and decayed, walls lined with empty frames where photos once hung. The 4th stood at the other end, his back to me. When he turned, I saw nothing behind his eyes, just the roster, printed in miniature across the whites, the ink still wet. He held out a blank card. "Clock in," he said. I didn't take it. Somewhere behind me, the door began to close. The 4th smiled, a slow, satisfied curve, and stepped forward, pressing the card into my palm. Cold spread from it into my arm. My vision faltered. For half a heartbeat, I saw myself or my ear from above, standing in the hallway, the roster pinned to my chest like a name tag. Then the door slammed. I was alone, except I wasn't. From the polished floor, my reflection blinked at me a fraction late, then smiled without my consent. The morning never came. When the roster clock clicked over to 6 o'clock, nothing changed. No gray light through the yard's far windows, no shuffle of the next shift arriving. The air was still soaked with night. The fluorescents hummed like they were the only reason the place still existed. I checked the roster. My name had moved again, this time to the 3rd line. Above me, his name. Above him, the 4th. A new blank space waited under mine, the cursor blink as patient as a heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the building, a slow series of knocks began. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats. The sound pulsed through the walls, not coming from any single direction. It felt like the building itself was counting. In the security office, the mezzanine feed showed the unmarked door standing open. Behind it, instead of the hallway I knew, was a long, dim aisle lined with battered filing cabinets. Dust drifted like snow. The camera's mic picked up a faint rustle, paper sliding over paper. Then a voice, neither mine nor his, spoke. "Every page is the same day." I left the monitors and walked. The yard was motionless. Even the rainwater from earlier was frozen mid-ripple in the puddles, as if the weather had stopped keeping time here. Past the loading bay, I reached the break room. The vending machine now displayed a single image on loop. The roster, fully filled. 10 names, my own in the middle. The lower names were smudged beyond reading, as though they hadn't been decided yet. A creak drew my gaze to the doorway. The 4th stood there, holding a battered file folder. He dropped it on the table. Inside were rosters from decades ago, yellowed and torn, but the names at the top were the same as the ones above mine now. Same ink, same order. I rifled through them, my pulse climbing. The dates jumped backwards. 1997, 1985, 1962. But the sequence of names never changed. Every so often, mine appeared in the middle, the ink fresher than the rest of the page. "History isn't behind you," the 4th said. "It's standing exactly where you are." I told him I wanted out. His eyes softened, but there was no pity. "You've already stayed. We're just catching up." The roster clock chimed again, not the flat beep, but a deep, bell-like tone that vibrated in my teeth. The 4th stepped aside. Behind him, the vending machine's display shifted to show the door to my own apartment, dark under a hallway light. Then it cut to me, or a me, sitting inside, staring toward the camera like I'd been waiting to be seen. I ran. The corridors folded around me. The same corners repeated. Break room, loading bay, archive hall. But each turn tilted them slightly wrong, the colors drained or oversaturated, the light angles impossible. The roster's blank lines stalked me in peripheral glimpses, flashing on walls, in puddles, across the ceiling like projected film. When I finally stopped, breath ragged, I was at the mezzanine. The unmarked door was closed again. The other me, the first double, stood beside it, holding the roster. He turned it toward me, tapping my name. The ink bled upward, letter by a letter, into the line above. "You're almost promoted," he said, as if it was good news. The knocks began again. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats. I reached for the door. My hand passed through the handle like smoke. The hallway beyond flickered into view without the door opening. It was filled with filing cabinets again, and in each drawer I could see rosters, infinite copies, some with my handwriting, some in scrawls I didn't know, all of them stamping the same loop into permanence. From behind me came the sound of the clock slot. A card sliding in. I turned just in time to see a new person pulling their card free. Face blurred, features swimming, as if not yet decided. They turned toward the roster wall and began to write. And the blink under my name by then Tanawarai faded into a solid line. I woke at the desk, not my apartment desk, the one in the security office, under the screens. My head had been down, arms folded, but the moment I lifted my eyes, the roster filled the largest monitor. Not a feed, not a camera shot. The roster itself, its edges breathing like lungs. My name sat at the top. Below me, his, the 4th, and 7 more. All 10 spaces now claimed, the ink glistening wet as though written seconds ago. The cursor blink was gone. Complete. Finished. The knock pattern began immediately. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats. The sound no longer traveled through the building. It came from inside me, timed to my pulse. Every monitor switched to the same view. The yard in still darkness, the rain frozen in midair. In each frame, a figure stood at the gate, waiting. It was me, or what I'd been. The door to the mezzanine opened on its own. Inside, the unmarked door had been replaced with a wall of rosters, layered so thick the paper curled away from the plaster. Every one had my name in the top slot, dates meaningless. As I stepped closer, the ink from the nearest sheet bled outward, detaching from the paper like smoke. It hovered, then drew itself into the shape of a door frame. Beyond it, the battered filing cabinet aisle, but now every drawer was open, papers fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. He emerged from the far end, the other me, the first double. But there was no edge between us now. His face was my face, his posture my posture. Only the eyes were different. They held the flat patience of someone who'd been here far too long. "This is yours now," he said, motioning to the aisle, to the drawers, to the endless record of names. "You keep it in order. You keep it moving." I asked what happens if I don't. His smile was empty. "Then it stops, and we can't let it stop." The cabinets whispered as we walked past, every open drawer holding a roster at a different stage of completion. Some had blanks near the top, others at the bottom. A few were completely empty, except for the title line, Night Shift. "You'll feel them arrive," he said. "You'll feel them leave. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they stay gone. But the list is always full." We stopped at a drawer with tonight's roster, but the top name was already smudged, fading like chalk under rain. My stomach turned cold when I realized it was me that was fading, the ink sliding down toward the second line. He touched my shoulder. "This is the part no one tells you. The top line is just the first to go when the loop shifts. Promotion isn't about power. It's about being the first erased." The knock sounded again, this time loud enough to rattle the cabinet handles. Somewhere deep in the aisle, a door creaked open. The fourth walked through, holding a blank card. Behind him, a blurred figure followed, features not yet drawn in. The new arrival. "You'll train him," the fourth said to me, "like you were trained." My double, or my predecessor maybe, turned and stepped back into the bleeding ink doorway. "Your shift starts now," he said, and the paper frame folded closed behind him. I was left standing in the aisle, the new arrival staring at me, the blank card outstretched. The roster in the nearest drawer shifted lines without a hand touching it. My name stayed in place, but the space below lengthened, pulling in the blurred silhouette like a drop of water into dry paper. The knocks went silent. The cabinet stopped whispering. Only the roster's steady hum remained. It began so quietly I almost missed it. My name, top of the roster, gave a faint shudder, as if a hand I couldn't see had brushed the paper. Then the black bled to a washed-out gray, curling at the edges like a dying leaf. I leaned in. The letters were fraying, each stroke loosening from the fibers until the ink itself seemed to float above the page. When I exhaled, it rippled, like it had felt my breath. From across the room, the fourth spoke. "That's the beginning. You're being unwritten." His voice had the calm finality of someone describing the weather.
I tried to press my fingertip over the fading letters to pin them in place, but the roster was sealed under its plastic cover now, locked behind 4 rust-brown screws that hadn't been there yesterday. The security monitors bled into a single feed, me standing here, one palm flat on the roster but already translucent. The background showed through my arm. My face on the screen looked almost relieved. Panic yanked me toward the mezzanine. The unmarked door was wide, spilling a paper-white glow into the corridor. Inside, the filing cabinet aisle waited, except tonight the drawers weren't whispering. They gasped, each one pulling and pushing air like a set of lungs struggling to breathe. Halfway down, I found the drawer with tonight's list. My name was still there, but so pale it was almost invisible. The top edge of each letter peeled upward in slow motion, like the page itself was trying to shed me. A footstep behind. I turned to see my other self, the first double, holding a glass vial filled with thick black ink. It swirled lazily inside, alive in a way that made my teeth ache. "You could fix it," he said. "Pour this back in. Write yourself again. But someone else will go missing." I asked who. A shrug. "Might be the fourth. Might be the one after you. Might be someone who hasn't even clocked in yet. The roster decides who falls." The vial was cold when he handed it over, as if it had been sitting in the dark for a very long time. The liquid inside pulsed faintly, sinking to my heartbeat. The drawers around us slammed open and shut, a chaotic staccato that made the air vibrate. Sheets spilled out onto the floor, rosters from decades, maybe centuries. In each, the names shifted in real time, climbing and falling, swapping positions without human hands to move them. My own name flickered on and off the lists, sometimes bold, sometimes a ghost trace. The fourth stepped into the aisle. "If you don't write yourself back, you vanish completely. No coming back. You won't even haunt this place." His expression didn't change. "If you do write, you'll keep your place, but you'll carry the vacancy you caused." The other me added softly, "And that vacancy will want to be filled." I knelt by the open drawer, the vial sweating cold into my palm. The roster in front of me was still breathing, a slow inhale, a long exhale like it was waiting to taste the ink. Around us the gasping stopped. Every cabinet leaned inward, listening. In the wall-mounted monitor at the end of the aisle, I caught the yard outside. The rain, frozen for nights now, was falling again, but too slowly, each drop leaving behind a faint, vanishing trail of words I couldn't read. The ground below shimmered with sentences already buried beneath the surface. I opened the vial. The smell was impossible, part metal, part salt water, part something older than either. The ink swirled impatiently. The fourth watched, still as a photograph. My double leaned close. "Choose," he said. "Stay and take. Or go and be taken." I hovered the vial over the page. For a single, treacherous second, the thought of staying, of keeping my place and erasing some nameless other, felt like survival. But under that was something worse. The knowledge that the roster would never stop asking for that choice again and again and again. The ink trembled at the lip of the glass. And I